So most of you have either experienced or already know the pace of innovation has been stifled by the coronavirus, from restrictions on lab time to working from home to unable to be able to meet in person. It's prohibited the industry from moving at a pace that we're accustomed to. However, as terrible as it has been and continues to be, there has been some unforeseen benefits. It's allowed us to slow down and strengthen our priorities, seeing a consolidation of our efforts towards those solutions vital for the sector, our health, and the world. It's shone a spotlight on the food system, both showing its weaknesses and strengths, and has also, as we've heard many a time before, accelerated trends we were seeing pre-pandemic. And two of these being health and wellness and the alternative protein space. That is why we are so excited to be partnering with Kellogg's and Unilever, two of the largest and most important forces in the food sector, to discuss their innovation priorities around gut wellness and plant-based meat and dairy, and find startups in the space that fit the bill to work with them. There's real opportunity matching entrepreneurs in these areas with Unilever and Kellogg, who have an enormous reach and robust scale-up capabilities to really and truly make a long-lasting difference. And we at Rethink are humbled to be part of this journey. So in terms of the schedule today for this webinar, we're going to start off with a 20-minute discussion around innovation priorities for 2021, followed by presentations from Deanne and André around the work that they're doing in these areas. We'll then wrap up with a 15-minute discussion about what each company looks for in startups and how they can work with external partners in the space. We'll also provide final details about applying and the process we will take in shortlisting companies to present at our March summit. I'll also be taking live questions from you, the audience, so please post those in the Ask a Question section located at the bottom right of the screen. I've seen that lots have come in already, so thank you so much for those. You can upvote these questions as well, and the more upvoted the question, the more likely it will be asked. We're also running a poll to hear from you where your innovation priorities lie in 2021, so please take a moment to answer this. Finally, feel free as well to use that comment section to encourage positive conversations or just cheer on the speakers. Also, if you do experience any technical issues, please comment in the chat as well, and one of my team will be able to assist you with that. So, without further ado, I'm delighted firstly in welcoming back Deanne Hayman from Kellogg after being involved in one of our earlier webinars this last year. So she is the Vice President Global Innovation Platforms and R&D at Kellogg Company since February 2019. And Deanne's experience spans across new product innovation, core product restaging, and extensive work with open innovation partnerships. And a first-time contributor to the webinar series as well, and hopefully not the last, André Potts. He is the Director of R&D, Science and Technology, Product and Processes for Foods within Unilever. And André has been with Unilever for over 21 years and worked in various roles within the food R&D space. So welcome to both of you. So great to have you on board. And I think just as a scene setter to set the stage and on a top level overview, I thought by asking the question around, what is the biggest challenges you're currently experiencing in your organizations? Deanne, would you like to go first?
Yeah, certainly. I think for us, it's really managing the consumer response through the whole pandemic, right? And really looking at how their behaviors were changing and were they shifting preferences, right? And I think what we found is they were really actually doubling down in the health and wellness space and on nutritious products. We worked pretty diligently through the pandemic to understand how the shift was coming at us and how we were responding, right? So obviously, like a lot of CPGs, we saw the shift from out-of-home consumption to in-home consumption. And based on the strength of our supply chain and our great Kellogg employee base, we were able to respond, in a safe way, but able to have a lot of our key core brands there for our consumers when they came to the stores. Also trying to manage what we knew was a shorter shopping trip. So they were really counting on core brands. So we really benefited from that in some of our core portfolios, like ready-to-eat cereal, our frozen foods, as well as snacks, right? And saw shifts happening from, what you normally would see. Someone would take small snack pack type items to work. We saw an impact there probably in some of our channels, but really benefited from on the other side with larger scale, larger size offerings. We have a pretty significantly sized away from home business, and we did see some challenges there we would have talked about last year, but are starting to see some green shoots of that coming around as folks are returning to work.
Brilliant, perfect. And yeah, André, are you seeing similar sort of challenges and sort of consumer habits in this space as well?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, very similar. It's almost echoing what Deanne was saying, where there's a massive consumer shift to in-home cooking, in-home eating, and therefore, for example, our retail side of the business has done really, really well. But for example, if you then look at our food service business with all the restaurants and out-of-home eating, has been struggling more. And you can clearly see that massive consumer shift. The other thing that, when I was thinking about this question in terms of challenges, in a way, of course, it hasn't taken away the key challenge for us to move into this plant-based eating habits. And that's what we'll be talking about more going forward.
Fantastic, brilliant. And yeah, I think following on from that, André, as I guess as people incorporate more plant-based foods into their diet, what in your eyes are the areas that are in need of most improvement? Is it kind of the taste? Is it texture? Is it kind of the diversity of products being available for the consumer?
Yeah, it's actually all of that and a couple of things more. But you've addressed a couple of key items that are very relevant for plant-based and the shift into plant-based eating, plant-based proteins as well. So obviously the first thing is taste and functionality. It's juiciness, bite, texture, whatever we offer to consumers to replace their conventional meat with should be at least as good or beating what meat is doing. Then if you look at the portfolio, of course, there is a super wide portfolio of all kinds of animal proteins, from steak to marbled products to sausages and all kinds of shaped products, but also, of course, cold cuts, and then fish and all kinds of seafood, and with plant-based alternatives. In some areas, we are quite good, actually almost, I would say, as good as meat. If you have the right application or in application, you don't taste the difference. But if you taste as such, or you want to go into, for example, a nice T-bone or a really nice piece of tuna, then of course we have quite a way to go. Now that is super important that we get both the range but also the availability, so that consumers find the product and that they easily make the change from conventional meat into a plant-based source. So what we have to make sure is we appeal to as many as possible consumers, also then of course in all the possible channels. And one other unlock, the one that you didn't mention yet, is also cost and scale. If you look at the scale of the meat industry, it's huge. Lines they use generally talk like 5 tons, 10 tons an hour of output of products, whereas most of the plant meat lines are substantially lower, hence substantially higher cost. So we need to think that scale to get to the cost level. And then I honestly believe that if we have products that are on par with meat in terms of cost, but obviously substantially better for planet and people, and at least as good in terms of taste and performance, then the growth will even go faster and faster.
That's a brilliant point. And I think that segues really nicely as well into kind of what Kellogg's is doing in terms of kind of the health and wellness space. So, I mean, Deanne, could you tell us a little bit more about kind of how you're, I guess, lowering the cost of those really important nutritious foods, and also kind of what you're seeing in terms of consumer behavior with regards to kind of nutritional products at the moment?
Yeah, I think just with the space being completely disrupted, right? But still a very specific focus from consumers on their immunity, right? And the types of, let me back up a little bit in terms of like occasions and things they're looking for. I think André touched on this a little bit, where consumers were sourcing their food from, and then how they were preparing it in home was totally shifting, right? So that was one very interesting, I think, thing that was happening, right? I think in-home baking exploded, right? It was impossible almost to find wheat flour at one point, almost in any channel that you would go to, and if you found it online, it might have been $20 a bag. But anyway, so I think also we saw, consumers seeking the types of foods and ingredients they were looking for. They were looking for trusted core brands, right? They had hard-earned dollars, and in a lot of cases, folks had lost their jobs, right? And so they were really tightly holding onto the dollars they had, and they needed to trust the foods that they bought, that their family or their significant others would eat, right, when they brought them into home. So I think traditional foods saw a huge benefit from that. And I think we also saw there was a bit of a bifurcation going on in terms of ingredients and what consumers were looking for in this space. They were really majoring on health and wellness and nutritional products. So looking to support their immunity either through supplements, through vitamin C and antioxidants and probiotics, kind of understanding at a very high level how that supports their immunity. But then on the other end of the spectrum, they were looking for indulgent foods, right? They were looking for sweets. I think ice cream sales skyrocketed. I think the alcohol companies benefited, not just because people were stressed out, I think, but also just because of the in-home consumption shifting from out of home, right? And then the one thing I would add before I finish the question is there was definitely an increase in interest in stress and anxiety management. And I think we saw that peak really in 2020, but we expect that to continue right as we go into 2021. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the positive benefits of a healthy microbiome.
Amazing, perfect. And I think just following on from a question that was asked by Lauren, what's consumers' kind of priorities and understanding of gut health specifically, and I guess how are you kind of communicating that to them at the moment?
Yeah, I think in a lot of different ways. So, as a leader in the plant-based space, we've really been focusing on the digestive wellness and those offerings in our portfolio and plant-based eating, right? I'm really trying to drive that message to consumers through a lot of our strong core brands and then through some new brands that we're incubating. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but they're clearly prioritizing immunity. Right, but I think the biggest gap is for us right now, and possibly for consumers, is I think they look at immune support as the things they know today in terms of probiotics and antioxidants. There's very, very little understanding of the role of how foods support gut health and how a healthy microbiome is a strong support to your immunity, right, to your immune system. And so I think those are the types of messages that we're looking to reinforce consumers. And I won't say I hope, because I always say hope is not a strategy, right? But I think there's an opportunity in what's happening right now as consumers are doubling down on immunity. There's a great opportunity because the evidence is really emerging in the space on how a healthy microbiome supports your immune system. There's an avenue, an opportunity for us to continue to talk about that, to talk about the role of foods, and specifically plant-based foods that are rich in fiber.
Brilliant. And André, I know that Deanne kind of mentioned those more indulgent flavors and foods such as ice cream and things like that. And there was a good question that was posted by Kenzia at the registration around, can you give a little bit more detail on the key pillars and strategies for achieving your 1 billion annual sales target for plant-based meat and dairy alternatives. You know, what are the steps that you're taking this year and next year to ensure this happens? But also, I think maybe touch a little bit upon, because in my mind, plant-based alternatives, I normally think of, you know, chicken substitutes or meat as well. But it'd be really interesting to hear kind of your foray, I guess, into the ice cream segment as well and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, on ice cream, I'll come back during the presentation a little later as well. But if you look at the plant-based ambition, there is 3 elements, and of course, one key one, of course, is the meat alternatives with the Vegetarian Butcher, which is a brand that we acquired 2 years ago. We're on a global rollout now, so that's a big part of that. But another big part also comes to the point that you just made from the ice cream part, where you see many vegan executions already, from Ben & Jerry's to Magnum, for example. And the third very important leg as well is what the Knorr brand is doing, or Knorr as we call it in this part of Europe, is facilitating plant-based eating. So there's not just, for example, what we're doing with plant meat is offering a replacement for the meat that you would actually eat, but offering solutions for the grains, the cereals, the beans that you can eat as such, and then making them very tasty, convenient, and nutritious. And also one of the elements of that is part of our Future 50 program that I will touch upon later as well. So these are the 3 elements. So one is under the sort of the Knorr brand, then it's all meat alternatives, and then there's the third leg, which is all the non-dairy based ice creams.
Great. And in terms of those sort of segments, what are you seeing as the fastest rates of growth?
Yeah, that's it's an interesting one. So first of all, one of the things that if you look forward, probably in the next 5 to 7 years, the growth in this space will be 10, 15, or even more % annually. So the perspective is really good. Now, if you look backwards, then for example, milk alternatives have been there for quite some time already, for a number of years. So specifically in milk, the growth has plateaued a little bit. But if you then look at products made out of milk, cheese or yogurt alternatives, etc., they are among the fastest growing. That's sometimes in some regions and geographies 50+% annually. But then if you look at meat alternatives or fish alternatives, they also grow between 20, 30, 40%, depending on product and region. So they're super, actually all the areas are booming. Where of course fish, for example, is relatively small still, from a small base, huge growth. And that's also true, for example, for egg replacement. Egg is maybe in percentage terms growing the fastest, but its base is still really, really small. So the story, it's difficult to say which area is growing the fastest, but it's all a very, very nice opportunity to be and to meet consumer demand.
Great. And I guess one question that's actually just come in from Peter Becker as well. There's obviously a huge amount of focus on alternative proteins, and proteins being that key word, but where do you both see kind of the importance of fibers in plant-based alternatives and kind of the foods that you produce? So Deanne, would you like to comment on that first?
Yeah, that'll be basically what I'll be talking about today, right? You know, so I said we see a huge role, right? And I think I love the fact, number one, that he asked the question and is probing in the area, because I think what we've seen is a lot of the conversation has been around plant protein. So we were super excited to initiate the Innovation Challenge, really, to call up the startups who are going to help us on the challenge that we have, right, on getting fiber into more of our foods, right? And so we've seen just consistent growth of some of the core foods in our portfolio that are rich sources of plant-based fibers. We have a lot of different brands, different sources of those fibers in them. So we would like to see more technology develop in those areas, and I'll talk specifically about what we're looking, but a lot of it is to address, I think, scientific evidence continues to build, right? But consumers have a lot of misconceptions, and I'm not going to say fear of fiber, right? But there's a huge fiber gap, and And I've talked about that before, but we'll iterate it again. And so I think finding more new and unique sources of fiber that are sustainable, that we can effectively process into our foods and have them be efficacious when we get them to consumers is absolutely what we're looking for.
Great. Yeah, and André, would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah, I will. It's of course the whole nutrition part and the positive impact on gut microbiome, for example, but also the functional element of fibers is big. In combination with proteins, there is a big area, a bit unknown territory, where we will be able, by combining, finding new and interesting structures and products. It's more a functional property in the product than potentially, and of course it will also still have a positive effect on your gut microbiome, but in this case it might not be the predominant reason why we would be using it.
Great, perfect. And yeah, kind of looking at the pandemic and kind of innovation priorities, how has the last year or so kind of affected those? And are you up to now a kind of a similar output as you were, or are things still being impacted at the moment? Something that I'm sure you've been asked a number of times the last sort of year.
Do you want me to start with that, or André?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I think before I get into it, the first thing I want to do is really recognize the entire Kellogg team for the incredible way everyone responded during the pandemic, right, to our entire employee base. I think people really found that they could adjust to that new normal. And perhaps in some cases, we were not as efficient as we would have liked to have been, but I think we did find that we were still fairly effective, right? And so I would say our overall priorities didn't change, but how we delivered against our innovation priorities, you know, through the pandemic and its effect on our productivity. We saw some impacts, as a lot of our peer companies did, with customers really focused on their current foods, their current shelf sets, and their current offerings. And so a lot of new innovation that we might normally bring to the market got pushed out, right? But we're starting to see that come back in 2021. Internally, I thought about this question. I realized that we've broken a lot of internal paradigms, right, in big companies, that you had to be physically present really to be productive. A lot of our, we created new ways to work with our external partners, with suppliers, with our co-manufacturers, where, you know, normally what we would call the cardinal rule, if you will, like you had to be physically present at a plant trial, you had to see what was happening. Well, that got eliminated, right? That was no longer possible. And so we found ways to be very effective in our work, particularly internally. And we either leveraged great online tools, or honestly, in some cases, we created our own, particularly in the case of just being able to we're a food company, right? To get food samples to folks to review, and then to have a collaborative review and discussion of those. So straight down even to things that are, you know, things that are really that small. So I think really breaking existing paradigms and doing it successfully.
Brilliant. Yeah, and André.
Yeah, it's just almost, I could replace Kellogg's with Unilever, and we have a very, I guess we've gone through the same journey, and I won't repeat too much, but it's indeed in the first weeks of the lockdown and when the pandemic really hit us, which is now almost a year ago, I think we were, you know, what's happening and how do we figure this out? And then quickly you see the energy coming and the ideas and the creativity, and the point that Jan made is, I think our efficiency got impacted a little, also because of limitation of people in the office, in the labs, etc. But our effectiveness we managed to maintain, also by throwing in loads of energy and commitment and people doing whatever it took to actually get things done. And indeed, trials and factory trials using cameras and any hour of the day from a distance, trying to get to the result that we needed. And I think it worked pretty well.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think we've seen a huge collaborative effort in the food system to kind of tackle those goals and challenges. So amazing. And I just wanted to quickly comment on the poll as well that was happening. So we've asked, you know, where did people's innovation priorities lie in 2021? Leading by a considerable margin, finding new partnerships is the #1 kind of vote at the moment. So people are in the right place. Kind of followed by, you know, working with startups and also exploring new markets. So yeah, that's really great to see. Thank you everyone for answering that. So I think now it's time to hand over to Deanne firstly, and then André to present a little bit more of about those specific innovation challenges that they've set for the ecosystem. So
Sure.
Deanne, whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Give me a second here, make sure I've got the right things going. Let's try this. All right. How am I doing?
Perfect. We can see that.
All right, let me get it into presentation mode. All right. Okay, thanks, Oliver. So good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Saw in the chat there's people from all across the globe, so excellent and delighted to have you here, and really pleased to be able to speak on behalf of the Kellogg Company today, and in partnership with Future Food Tech, right, to initiate this innovation challenge. And it made sense for me today to start here with you to share our recently refreshed vision and purpose. So our vision is about a good and just world where people are not just fed, but fulfilled. And so not only just feeding people the physical benefit of doing that, which is a little bit of what the innovation challenge is about, but we want to think beyond that. And well-being is also really about the social connections that we have and the emotional health that we have. So that really speaks to being fulfilled and wanting to see that. Our purpose is to continue to ensure everyone has better days and a place at the table through experience with our great brands and the diverse foods in our portfolios. And we're also committed to innovating in ways that will really bring this purpose and this vision to life. And so that's really why I'm here speaking to you today, initiating the Innovation Challenge in partnership with Future Food Tech. And my team and I are really excited to hear from startups who are interested in working with us and supporting us on our journey. So Kellogg's has a long history of supporting gut wellness through fiber, all the way back to our beginnings, where our principal message was really about a low-fat diet that was plant-based and rich in fiber. And if you fast forward 115 years to where we are today, we're really still have not taken our focus off the fact that we are a plant-based food company. And we want to continue to help consumers grow that within their own diets and their nutrition habits. But we know a lot more now than we did back then about the benefits of a plant-based diet that's rich in fiber. You know, we know a lot more now about the role that gut microbes, play in the benefits that are attributed to those fiber-based foods, and really the advancement of our knowledge in the microbiome space has just exploded, right? And it really has changed the way that we look at how our body takes on nutrition, right? Perceives nutrition, and how that impacts our overall health. And so I mentioned in the purpose that we really want to connect with consumers and the microbiome opportunity in the way that they experience initially, right, first through our great brands and through our great foods. And we've got a strong portfolio of global brands. And you'll see those here on this slide, where we've really been telling the message about plant-based fiber foods for a while, right, for the legacy of a lot of these brands. You'll also see some new brands there, new brands that we're incubating. Right, but even within that arsenal of offerings, if you will, there's a diverse range of plant-based fibers to nourish the gut microbiome. I mentioned we're incubating some new brands. You'll see down at the bottom of the screen, MWell, which is a new offering. It is a direct-to-consumer platform and food offerings that we have set up, and foods are available right now only through the UK. So that's where we're incubating this experiment, if you will. But putting the MWell experiment into place and watching consumers respond to that positively, as what we've seen, consumers are really looking for simple solutions to support their health. They want to improve gut health, but they don't always know how to do it, but they're looking for some simple solutions to be able to do that. So MWell is one of the ways that we're going to bring a new and differentiated offering to them. So the gut microbiome is really the future of nutrition, as I just spoke about, and it is our new understanding of the pathway to our health. There's mounting evidence, right, to support the fact that the microbiome is directly or indirectly linked to nearly every system in the human body, right? Our metabolic system, our immune system, our hormonal systems, or the different neural processes, right, that we possess. We know the microbiome changes throughout our life cycle and with our age. We know it responds to everyday factors like what we eat, what we drink, how much stress we're under, and how much sleep we may have had the night before. And subsequently, that has an impact on our energy levels. It has an impact on our mood. It has an impact on our anxiety and our subsequent sleep quality the nights following, and even on our metabolism. Right, so just a preponderance of an impact of the connection of the microbiome to overall health. We know specifically there's building bodies of evidence around what we eat and drink, and the direct impact that has on the composition of the microbes in our gut, the diversity of that population in our gut, and the function of those foods and the different diversity of fibers in setting up and impacting the microbiome. But I think what we can communicate that plant fibers, they're the major source of energy for the gut microbiome, right? And they're one of the most important ways to nourish the gut. So I like to say repetition is good management, and I think you've heard me talk about this before, but I just spoke about the scientific evidence that's really building and supporting the role of the microbiome in our health. On the behavioral side, what we are eating is equally important to focus on, right? And we know today, based on our conversations with consumers, they believe they know the benefits of fiber, and they also believe they're actually consuming enough fiber. But the reality is 9 out of 10 people, right? 90% of the population in the markets we can measure in some of our developed markets, they're not meeting their daily fiber intake. And it's enough of a concern that the inadequate intakes have even been called a public health concern. So quite alarming. And I think there is, building on that, there's also definitely a gap in consumers' understanding or misconceptions about fiber. And some of these are some beliefs around all whole grain foods are good sources of fiber. Foods with fiber are expensive, they're difficult to prepare, and they don't taste good. And consumers are very much not aware that adequate fiber intakes are consistently linked with reduced risks for chronic disease. So yet another reason, right, to focus on that gap. And we know that people don't choose enough high fiber foods, or they may be challenged to locate, identify, and find those. And so hence one of the reasons that we're initiating the Innovation Challenge is because we're looking to continue to build our offering of foods to consumers with plant-based food offerings that are rich in fiber. So what are we looking for? I saw some questions in the chat specifically on this, so I'll give you as much detail as I can here, and I'm fairly certain we'll post all the details of this on the website as well. So we're looking for emerging plant-based fibers, and this would include new types and new sources of plant fibers, new ways of processing, sustainable sources of fibers, and definitely those that would also offer improved texture and sensory properties. Goes without saying, across all of these, we're interested in cost-effective solutions and cost and use. But I also always discuss with my stakeholders internally, new generations of technologies are often not the most cost-effective ones. But as you commit to a relationship with a partner, and you grow that business, we often see the costs come down. And so I always say first generation of ingredients or technologies or foods are not always the most cost effective, but when you stay with that and you support it and drive that, you see the costs come back to you. Value-added fibers from waste streams. We are starting, or I should say we are continuing to see consumers express interest to us in sustainability and the sustainability story, right? They want to know where their ingredients and their packaging has come from. And so we are looking at fibers from processing waste streams that are cost-effective and applicable in food, ones that will be grain-based, vegetable-based, or fruit-based. New sources of prebiotics we're also looking for. So beyond inulin, beyond FOS, and other similar offerings that are plant-based and not synthetic. The evidence stage could be preclinical, but we're looking for cost and use again. And prebiotics that could be incorporated in foods that would not cause excessive processing challenges. And additionally, into the challenge, so other microbiome technologies that we are interested in, new cost-effective probiotics that are applicable in food systems that also help support gut wellness, non-spore, food-stable probiotics, and when I talk about food-stable in shelf life, but also stable through processing, through cooking, through extrusion, or different baking processes that they might experience. And postbiotics, which is kind of the new kid on the block, which contain non-viable cells, their metabolites, and also other cell components. And research is continuing to show that they may also be critical in promoting the health and wellness of our gut microbiome. And for Kellogg's, what we're looking for is, again, applicability in food systems and regulated and approved or on a path to be there. So with that, thank you to everyone who's on the line right now. Best of luck to all the innovators and to the startups who will be interested in participating with us. We're excited to hear from you, and we'll look forward to that. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Deanne. And we'll talk about some more questions that have come in, as well as how you kind of work with startups in a minute. But André, would like to come up now and.
Yeah, you can hear and see me if everything is all right, and I'll actually start sharing my presentation now. And I go on full screen, and then it should be good to go. I guess you can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Great, good. So thanks for hosting us in this innovation challenge. And I would like to talk about the challenges and the opportunities in the plant-based meat and also dairy alternatives. In this case, ice cream. And why is this important to us? Because we know there are huge challenges in the food system. In a way, it's not functioning, it's broken. And we think that moving towards a more plant-based diet, moving away from conventional meat, is one key enabler or a key unlock for the future of basically the planet, but also for the health of the people on the planet. Now, and then I would like to take the next couple of minutes to talk through the key challenges that we're seeing. But first, let me explain a bit the ambition Unilever has for its foods business. This was announced in all the details by the end of last year, and I've captured here a few of the key points, which is basically reaching that 1 billion sales turnover target in the next 5 to 7 years. And I've just talked about how we plan to do that. But we not only want to achieve that target, we also want to do that in a way that is, on one hand, better for consumers, because we reduce a number of the more negative or the ingredients of concern, like salt, like sugar, but also the energy, the portion size and the energy proportion of our products to meet a sustainable diet. And on the other side, we also want to double our products that deliver what we call positive nutrition. And that is either a system that is fortified with micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, or that has an increased level of fiber, just like Deanne was explaining, or potentially increased protein levels, anything that is helping to sustain or reach a more healthy diet. And while doing that, we will achieve a more healthy and most of all more sustainable global food system, while of course ensuring also therefore then a sustainable business. Now, why do we think we can do it? Of course, you know, the size and the scale of a company like Unilever, and our brands like Knorr or Hayman's have a global reach. As an example, we reach around 500 million consumers every day. And of course, not only with the big brands that are seen everywhere, but also with the smaller and local brands, and more also with, for example, our vegetarian butcher brand. And you can see the Rebel Whopper at the top right of the screen. So there is a global reach and global brand, and on top of that, as I already mentioned, we've done a number of acquisitions, and the vegetarian butcher is one example, but there are others. Then the other key thing is investment in the last couple of years, and this was opened a year ago in a new innovation center that is based on the campus of the Wageningen University in the Netherlands, which is a place that allows us to work with the best state-of-the-art partners from both academia, but also startups and other companies that are located in the proximity. And of course, not only in the Wageningen proximity, but also we're using and working with many other academic and non-academic partners in the world. And one other example of partnerships, for example, is Algenuity, is a UK-based company developing technology to get protein out of algae. And with them, we are cooperating towards development of products and proteins that we can use and apply in our products in different ways, being it a vegan mayonnaise or specific meat alternatives. And finally, one of the key initiatives of the Knorr brand is the Future 50 Foods, which is actually related to not only bringing more plant-based eating forward, but also diversifying the crops that we're eating, so that we become less dependent of a very small and therefore vulnerable amount of food staples, that we can use more of the locally produced, more economical, affordable, but also generally with a very high nutritional profile, locally sourced crops and vegetables. So all in all, we're well placed to have a very big positive impact, to influence consumers positively when they choose for our products, which then help to increase, of course, their how they enjoy their meals, both in sensory way, but also from a nutritional perspective. Now, what are we then looking for? And I'll elaborate on a couple of examples. So one thing is we're looking for alternative protein solutions. Today, most of our protein sources, vegetable proteins, are coming from soy, pea, and wheat. And that's fine, but if you look at the dependence we have on a very small number of huge crops, it's not a sustainable position. Climate change, other risks can really jeopardize that. Therefore, we need to extend and expand our portfolio of products that we're using, actually not only because of resilience and availability, of course, also because of functional properties. And the next generation products that we're looking at, for example, are like oat proteins, but also lentil, faba beans, chickpeas, potato. And the things we're looking at is, of course, on one hand, functionality, to have a positive impact in the products that we're making, in terms of binding or juiciness or bite, texture. Of course, also from a nutritional perspective, but also very important, the absence of off flavors, a beanie off note that is often associated with pea or soy. These are the kind of things that we would like to work on with partners, or that we would like partners to work on, and come up with better propositions that suit our products, and that we therefore jointly can explore and grow further. Now then, of course, more going forward, there is a whole series of options in biotech solutions, and some are closer to applications or actually being applied already, like algae in fermenters, or some of the microproteins in big fermenters, but also huge systems that grow algae or small cell-based plants or singular cell plants in sun, not using any other source of energy. And then further out, but that's really a little bit further out in our view for our products, is more things like cultured meat or precision fermentation. But all these things we do keep an eye on, and our filter always is the product more sustainable? Is the solution more sustainable? Is it available at sufficient scale? And is it also cost effective in what it's supposed to do? And if we meet those demands, then of course we can act fast and integrate solutions of future protein sources quickly in our products. But that is what we're looking for from a protein perspective. The next element is also, and it's a little bit in a similar way, I think, as Deanne was explaining, is also better processes. I mentioned before that if you look at the meat industry, the scale is huge. Their lines are incredible in efficiency and in output. In terms of plant meat, in this case, we are way behind that. We need to up our game and invest. But we also still need better and more efficient processes to structure proteins. We need to be able to start from vegetable proteins or protein flours, and then in the right treatment in terms of heat, shear, create the fibers that mimic meat and that we can modulate to get more firm fibers or longer fibers, or to get the structure that mimics whatever we try to mimic in terms of conventional meat, and that then of course meet the needs of consumers. And that is a big challenge, because there is of course solutions, and most used solution is extrusion, but there are also key disadvantages. And for scaling fast and effective, we would like to look beyond what is available and possible with extrusion technologies. Then another area we mentioned briefly, of course, is in ice cream. And ice cream, it's really about creating that smooth richness based on vegetable proteins, but without some of the defects that sometimes are associated with vegetable proteins, which is like the beanie flavor again. Well, a beanie flavor in a meat alternative to some extent can be accepted. Consumers understand where this is coming from. But if you eat an ice cream and you really want an indulgent vanilla or strawberry, then you do not want a beanie note. That's not acceptable. So we need to find solutions that do not have that beanie note, but also do not give any textural or structure defects like graininess or sandiness, which is a problem of protein in ice cream, etc. So the solutions we would be looking for would be bland in terms of taste, structurally stabilizing the structure of ice cream in a way that is as good as or comparable to the current dairy solutions. So that gives a perspective of the three areas that we're looking at, and then the challenge basically to the audience and all the participants is how can we join forces to improve the taste, texture, sustainability, and affordability of plant-based products, both alternative meat alternatives and dairy alternatives. That was my update in a probably just under 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. You hit the time right on that. Thank you, both of you. So yeah, loads of questions coming in. So I think firstly, I'd just like to ask, for this challenge, is there a specific stage of business that is most attractive for you guys at the moment? Can people essentially come to you with an idea and nothing else? Are you looking for kind of startups? Are you looking for SMEs? What would you say to that? Maybe Deanne, if you'd like to go first.
Certainly. Yeah, I think both in the startup space, and also obviously I think I saw a question from some other companies, mature companies as well, I guess, if that's the right term to use for them, right? So, and then I think also we recognize the fact that startups tend to be in different places within their needs, and also what we're looking for. But essentially, we're looking for understanding better from a due diligence perspective on our side, right? Financial viability, but also on the strategic side. So what are they offering that's unique, differentiated, and protected as well? And then also understanding a technology pipeline behind that. So I think that we have a broad interest in hearing from everyone, right, who could possibly meet that innovation challenge. Ideally, something more than just an idea on a piece of paper, based on the timelines, the kinds of timelines that we're on, and to be honest with you, what consumers are expecting in the space and the ability to move with agility. Yeah.
And André?
Yeah, it's very similar, and so what we're seeing is there is a big merit in working both on with relatively small startups or scale-ups, as well as the big multinational sort of ingredient suppliers, and with in both ways we can find unique solutions and then have a benefit for both of us. But maybe going back to startups a bit is the experience we have in the past years basically is that it is not always very easy, because we're a relatively big and sometimes not super flexible organization with systems and procedures in place. And I see Deanne smiling because of the point. And where startups, of course, are generally small team, they can decisions now and move in 10 minutes. And that is sometimes things that we have to manage and be aware of both ways, that we can facilitate that. And startups for us, it's also important that they are as specific but also realistic as they can get, because sometimes we get approached with a solution that's basically the solution to anything. It will improve anything that you eat and do, and your cognitive performance and everything. And we then already almost know this is not going to fly, right? It's important to know, what are you really good at? Where is your product making a difference? And what is the problem it's actually solving? And then we can have a discussion and see where we then can see if there is a business case and merit in going further.
Great, that's really clear. Thank you. And I think in terms of your relationship with the companies that you partner with, again, specifically kind of a bit more of the earlier stage companies, do you provide funding for them or resources and licensing? And people are also asking maybe to comment on kind of the IP ownership of these as well.
Yeah, I think I can jump in on that real quickly. Just from our perspective with startups, we know that they're at different stages, right, in their needs, and so we've taken a couple paths, if you will, either from an approach of venture capital due diligence. A lot of companies are looking for that inflow of cash, right, and they need that to enable their work. We've also encountered companies where they've come to us and said, "Look, we've got plenty of cash," which is a great problem to have, right? We now have to actually start making things and producing significant quantities of an ingredient, right, for companies like Kellogg to work with. And so one of the benefits from either one of those partnerships, honestly, is the functional capability of Kellogg's and our strong applications capability, right? So a lot of companies looking for that. So we've either kind of gone the venture capital route, or we've also gone the research agreement and joint development agreement route. And I think you said there was a question too about IP and ownership. I think that's something, I can't say anything definitively right now, but I could say it's probably something that we discuss and negotiate.
Yeah, I can only echo that, and it's always a topic that we discuss, of course. And at the end of the day, that's also the experience we have. And it sounds a bit maybe idealistic, but you truly have to find that win-win. Because if there is something where only the startup or one side is benefiting substantially more than the other, it's not a long-term sustainable relationship. And you have to find that. And if it works, then you can do miracles, and you also then solve issues or maybe differences of insight in how you divide the IP in terms of time or geography or application or whatever is the thing to do.
Yeah, perfect. And I think on that point as well, in terms of the geography, do you look for different applications in different markets, and depending on what different consumers throughout the world are looking at, or is it more kind of a global approach? Because obviously you are global companies catering for basically the whole world. So kind of what's your approach there?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go ahead, André, please.
We look at the local markets. So we look at what are top 10 dishes, what are the most eaten, what's the pattern of consumption in the country, and what is the highest in demand, for example, in this case, meat source, or what's the top 5, and how can we tap into that? And that might be different in Latin America from Asia, from Europe, and therefore we tweak the portfolio to meet the consumer demand. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, I build on that a little bit and just say, I think what we know is taste is local, but needs are global in a lot of cases, right? The need state doesn't change. And so I think as we've worked with different smaller companies in the past, if we have an idea that is successful in one region, and we know that need is perpetuated in other regions across the globe in our businesses, we're going to look to globally expand, right? So we're looking for somebody who can either have a vision to create that manufacturing commercial capability alongside us, or someone we can bring in maybe as a third party, right, to help that commercial and manufacturing growth.
Great. And now a couple of questions kind of more focused on the actual topics that you're covering. So André, so what's your position on ingredients kind of produced using genetically modified or genetic transformation? So for example, kind of cell-based ingredients, or those produced by microbial fermentation, you know, like Impossible's heme protein or Perfect Day's flora. What do you say to those sort of applications?
Yeah, so of course, I need to be careful, because of course we have probably a carefully written official position on this one that I should probably exactly know and remember and state now. But the thing is, of course, one thing is it depends on very much what is allowed in a certain country. So some countries are very strict and some do allow more than others. That's one. Products made with biotech, yeast or cells, generally algae, things like this, not yet cultured meat. Yeah, we are interested. The moment you have to label things saying genetically modified, etc., maybe a rephrase. The moment we have to label something that might cause a consumer response that is not positive, then we would be more reluctant. Mm-hmm. And we know most consumers would not like to read that it's genetically modified, made with genetically modified organisms, etc. And so it's more consumer call than there is anything else, because of course the future very much sits in this kind of future biotech developments. And if we want to feed 10 billion people, we have to open up our minds a bit to all the solutions. But the consumer perception, I think, is going to lag behind a little. It will take some time, maybe another crisis.
Yeah, definitely. I think that education piece is definitely starting to emerge, and kind of that more conversation around the labeling side of things as well, I think will really help. And then for Kellogg, Deanne, you know, would Kellogg's potentially be interested in kind of a monosaccharide that is processed in the gut as a soluble fiber, even if the FDA has not kind of issued guidance on whether that can be labeled as a fiber as such? And that was asked by Ed.
Yeah, so for Ed, I always hate to say not interested, right? But I think for us, in terms of what we would prefer, we would be mostly interested in fibers that meet the FDA definition, right? And then also other regulating bodies across the globe that would view that as fiber. I think if that doesn't exist, we would really want to see a dossier that's well on its way to being submitted or being considered to meet a lot of the requirements for that.
Great. So one more question for André. So we've obviously seen that, you know, the EU food safety approval of yellow mealworm, they said they were safe for human consumption. I think it was about 5 days ago now. How do you see kind of cricket protein and kind of other insect protein compete with plant-based protein in kind of human food applications?
It's a nice question, and in a way, probably it's a really strong competitor, depending on its functional properties, off flavor, things like this. There is one big hurdle, which is consumer acceptance in large parts of the world, and that's why at this stage we're not actively engaging with insect protein, because it might be relevant for a few markets, but it's definitely not relevant for the majority of markets. And then there is lower hanging fruits with alternative proteins that we can explore that are making more sense at this stage. Definitely not ruling out that in the future, also insect protein is going to be more relevant than it is today. But again, we need a consumer shift.
Great, perfect. And yeah, I know we're at time now, but just one question for the both of you. Is there any advice for the companies interested in reaching out to you or working or applying for this? Would you give any sort of final remarks or tips? And Deanne, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the most important things is having a succinct and cogent pitch, right? That not just doesn't talk about the benefits of what you believe you're bringing, but some things that illustrate, right, financial status of your company, and really any IP protection, your technology strategy, and honestly your technology pipeline. But being able to share that succinctly. So either through some of our technical team, which a lot of our folks have contacts in the industry and ways to reach them, but also through, you can also submit a pitch through 1894. But ideally through this innovation challenge, right?
That's it. And André?
Yeah, a similar comment. Also, our team members, the R&D team members, have excellent networks, and many of the companies that I see on the chat box, actually in some we have had contacts or explored or looked at. Not going to repeat what Deanne said about when approaching us. Maybe one build is think, as a startup, you can already think how this is important for us or for a company like Kellogg's. And finally, also, of course, on the Unilever portal, there is an innovation segment and there is a contact point. But also feel free to contact me or the R&D team members, either in the global teams in Wageningen that I mentioned, or in the regions that you're based, because they will connect and we will find the right person to talk to.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, guys. As I've been reading on the chat, everyone has found this incredibly interesting, and there's some great insights, great understanding of how you guys work, and a little bit more about how you're partnering and those key challenges that you're going to be prioritizing over the next year. So thank you so much for taking the time for sharing those and really setting the seeds of what is going to be an exciting and motivating innovation challenge for our March Summit. So for all of those watching and thinking, yes, our solutions tick all those boxes for what they're looking for, and either of those companies would be lucky to have us, of course. Well, you're in luck, because you can then apply over at Future Food Tech San Francisco website, which is the Future Food Tech SF.com. So that's futurefoodtechsf.com, and there you'll find a tab on the top of the menu bar labeled Innovation Challenge, and you can find that respective challenge that you wish to apply for, and you can then fill out a few of your information pieces. You can also click on the Apply Now button down below if you're currently viewing now. It will then be submitted to us, and then we'll work with Deanne and André as well as their teams to identify those that they feel are most in line with what they're looking for, and we'll shortlist 3 finalists to then present at our March event. Deadlines for entry are February the 5th, and then we'll be announcing the finalists around mid-February. We'll do our absolute best to get back to everyone, but please do bear with us. There's been a lot of applications already submitted, which is fantastic. We do really appreciate all the time and effort that goes into these applications. I know they're your babies. So if you have any queries about the application process, do please email marketing@rethink.events.com. And that's also on the bottom of the application form, and then we'll get back to you with some answers there. So some final remarks as well about the webinar, because there's a couple of questions that have just come in. You'll be able to view this recording of the discussion online this week, and you'll receive a link as well to re-watch or share with your colleagues. So please do share the challenge with anyone that you think fits the bill as well. But to all those applying, good luck. What an exciting time, and we really can't wait to read through all of these submissions over the next month or so. But until then, that's it from me. Once again, thank you very much, Deanne and André, for those perspectives, the Kellogg and Unilever teams as well as yourselves watching. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.